Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Custom Connections in Advanced Steel. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software GRAITEC Group. My name is Misty Scott, and I'm pleased to be your moderator today. As a reminder, you can find a schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today. Douglas Morton is a technical specialist at GRAITEC, specializing in advanced steel. He has a strong background in 3D steel and concrete modeling and documentation systems. Doug has extensive experience providing training and maintaining user advancement programs, offering software support, and participating in multidiscipline coordination projects. Thank you so much for joining us today, Doug. And for those attending, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to drop those in the live chat. We will visit them at the end. All right, I'll go ahead and get things rolling.
Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. During this session, we will be taking a look at the Custom Connections tool in Advanced Steel. My name is Doug Morton, and I'm an application specialist for GRAITEC, working with the Advanced Steel software. As mentioned, the focus of today's webinar will be custom connections, and we will see how we can create them and how they can be used. Let's get started. We're going to take a look at how we can create a custom connection. The custom connection itself is found on your tool palette, which if you need to open that up, you go to the Home tab. It's right here, Advanced Steel Tool Palette. If you come down to the third category on the side, you'll see Custom Connection. And we're going to look at how to create and use a custom connection. To start off with, I'm going to build something similar to this. I'll show you how I did it. And then we're going to turn that into a connection. So I'll take this one here, and I'm going to start by going to 2D wireframe. I want to build the sleeve that this is going to go into. So I'm just going to draw that in. Circular hollow section. I'll pick a point. I want it to go up, and I'll make it 6 inches long. That'll come in. I pick the size that I want for my sleeve. Okay. Any other variables I need to set, and let's see, they have a railing pipe connection. That's good enough. So we'll put our information in. We have our part there. Now I need to move this down a bit, so I'm going to move this down, let's say 10 inches. See if that's the right height. That's probably too much, so we'll move it back up a bit. Let's say 2 inches there. Yeah, good enough. So now I have my sleeve down underneath the flange, and I want my rail to come into that. So we're going to continue to build this. I want to have a plate that comes off of this going to the web of the beam. So I can come into here and I can use, in the custom connection area, they have tools for plates. Now, whenever you're creating a custom connection, it's probably better to use the plate tools from here if you can, or the tools that they provide here if you can, simply because these tend to have a reference point and they tend to be more dynamic if things get changed. So I'm going to select the plate here and pick the sleeve that I just created. It says, do you want to select a reference point? Yes or no? So I'll say yes. I'll just pick the center point at the top here. That's fine. That'll be my reference point. Now, if you don't, it's not the end of the world. You have the ability to go in here and you can say, I want the main system line or main physical line to be my reference. It'll work just the same. At this point here, I want this not to be parallel, but perpendicular. And I need it to go towards the actual shape itself, towards the beam itself. So you can see it's going to come off one side or the other side. So what I'm probably going to have to do here is just rotate this 90 degrees one way or the other. So it's looking at the orientation of my shape and basing it off of that. Okay. So if it doesn't line up initially the direction that I want, one side or the other side, I can always rotate the main shape that I'm attaching to, and then it'll come out this way. Yep. I'll go back into the settings for that plate. I'm going to make this height 3 3/4, and I'll make the towards the web, and then I'll make the height 6 inches. So that gives me the plate going in towards that beam. I can set the thickness to something else if I want. I have the ability to come in here and say I want to create a weld that'll weld the two pieces together, the plate with the sleeve here. I also am going to need to add a weld on the other side. That's not going to be part of this menu. But you have other controls in here as well with an offset. And depending on what tool you select from the custom connection area, you'll get different variables and different tools that allow you to set up that object. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to just add in a weld. So I'll take a weld here. I'll say I want to weld that plate to that beam. I'm just going to put it on the inside near the middle. Shop. I'm going to continue this all around. I can set notes, do whatever I need to, and that's just from the weld command from the objects tab. So it's going to recognize those two parts if I select them both. So I'll pick both like that, and then pick the weld, and then say what I want it to be. At the same time, I want to put a cap plate at the bottom. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to use my connection vault. And so yes, we are creating a connection, but connections can be part of the connection. That's not a problem. So I'll come into here, and I'll say I want to place an end plate near the bottom. And I'll just go quickly through this. I don't want it to be 1/2 inch. Let's make it a little bit thinner. And I want it to be round. Okay. The dimensions, maybe I'll pull it in by 1/16 of an inch. So that way, if we're welding it, it has a place to grab to, and we're good. Okay, so there's my cap plate. I can also extend the pipe down now. So what I need to do now is in the dialog for the handrail, if I have no connection here, I can't extend it, but I can still use my tools here. And that can be part of my connection. So I can use my feature cuts from my tool palette, use the shorten command on the handrail, and then I just set it to a negative value so that way it lengthens it rather than shortens it. And then you can see I pushed it down 7 inches so that it's now inside the pipe, or inside the sleeve rather. And it's going through there. From here, I want to put some bolts. So I can come back to my Objects tab, make sure my switch is set to bolt. I'm just going to take the rectangular center point one, and I'm going to pick both the sleeve and the pipe, and then I'm going to put it right in the middle of that sleeve there. You can see I have my UCS set the wrong direction, so I'll just go back, rotate around the X, and then do it again. And there we go. So you pick the type of bolt or connection that you want to have there. You know, nut and washer. You know, they got you have setless options. You can put what you want. Create that connection, and then say OK. Now, once you have everything in place, just double check and make sure it's the way that you want it. So let's say I have my plates being fastened to the side there. I've got the bolts going through both the sleeve and the handrail. I've got the cap plate at the bottom. This is, let's say this is a connection that I want. How do I create the actual custom connection now that I can use over and over again? And just, you don't have to, but you can create different connections if you want. Maybe I wanted 3 bolts, maybe I wanted 1 bolt, maybe I want a different plate. I can just continue and I can make a whole bunch of them in the same drawing. That's not a problem, but I would create different connections for each. So what I'm about to do here, I would create a different connection. Right, I would just come up here, and on my tool palette, that third category down, you're going to see you have custom connections. The very first button is going to be to create a custom connection. Click on that. You require shapes in order for this to work. There's no other way to do this. So I'm going to come in here and say, am I attaching this just to one beam? No, I'm not. I'm actually attaching it to the beam and the post. So I want these two as my main parts so that whenever I want to place this connection, I have to select those main parts. Okay. So I have to pick 2 beams. This would be what I want for my first one. Select the beam going across, then select the post and right click. You're going to see this dialog comes up. And we're just going to fill this out from top to bottom. The name area in here, this is going to be, for example, rail by side connection 1, if you want. Call it whatever you like. Select the parts. Now you want to make sure that everything's showing, your welds and your feature cuts and stuff like that. You want to make sure everything's there visible so you can grab them. So you're just going to say reselect the outputs objects. You don't have to do the beam and the post, so you can just go around the objects that are added into that connection, and it'll pick those items. And right click. You'll notice that the minute you reselect objects, the items you've selected, you end up getting a connection or blue box around it, connection box around it. You then need to decide what kind of situation is taking place. Do we have beams that are going end to end or shapes end to end? No, that's not the case. Are they going flush, one right up against the other one? They're not. This is says it's coming into it, but it's not touching it. It stops at the flange edge, which will work in this situation here. Then we're going to fill out the bottom. You notice when I click on that first box, the beam turns red, and it just wants you to describe what is this. So I'm going to say beam, and then I'll come to the second one here and say post. So that describes the post. So now when it prompts me to select my objects, it'll say, please select your beam, please select your post. There is no save or apply. Once you finish filling everything out, you can close it. The key to this, however, is after you've selected your objects and you see that blue box, again, you can do another connection here, another one here, or you can go create other connections off to the side. It's not a problem. You can have as many as you want in the one DWG file. But when you're done, you're going to save it to a specific location. So I'm going to start off by coming into here. I'll do save as. And I'm going to navigate to my drive C. I'm going to go down to program data. This is a hidden folder in Windows. If you don't see it, it's because it's hidden. You have Autodesk, the version of Advanced Steel you're using, your localization. And once you get into your localization, basically you're coming up to this point here, program data, Autodesk, your version of Advanced Steel, the localization you're using. Now you're going to go to shared, and you'll see there's a folder called connection templates. Go into there, and you're going to say, what is the name of this connection template, right? So in here, I'm just going to put, whatever, I'll call it, give it a name. Custom connections, it's good enough. Save. Now, because that's saved there, anytime we go and we want to use it now, I'll just save it again in a different place. We'll get rid of it. So I'll show you, let's see, desktop. I have my work done here. I'm just going to go into that and save it here. So save. I can get rid of these elements now if I want. Right. And here I'm just going to get rid of the connection. Actually, it's not a connection yet, but you can do that and get rid of that. You can see I have nothing connecting that handrail to the side. But I can come into here, custom connections now, same place as before, my tool palette, third category down. And when I come up here, I have the ability to use the insert connection template. If you've saved this to the connection templates folder that we looked at before inside of where you have the program installed, then any connections you have in that DWG will be listed here. And there's the one that we just created. I'll say OK. You'll notice that the tooltip right away says select the beam. So I'm going to pick the beam. And then it says select the post. And I'll pick the post. And it places that connection in. Okay. I can allow object modification, which means that when I do that, now I can actually go in and I can adjust things. So maybe I didn't want a 1/2-inch bolt, or maybe I didn't want an A325, or I wanted something else. I can go make changes to that. I can select my cap plate. And then here there's my joint properties for my cap plate. So even though it's a custom connection, I can still make changes to the elements that are in it. All right. So if I've used, bolts or welds or cap plates or anything else, I can still make changes to it. If the parts that I've drawn manually, I could adjust those as well. This sleeve, this connection here now, if I want to use it on the rest of them, it's used similar to a regular or a standard connection. So you can go in now and you can use your connection tools. You'll see they have the standard connection tools where if I wanted to copy or create a similar one, I could come in and grab that, pick my connection, right click, I'll take the beam and the post, and you can see it's going to put it on there. There's no box only because it's a refresh issue. So if I refresh the view all, basically, the box will come in. And I have that connection there. So I can use my connection copy tools to bring them across. Let me get rid of that. I also have the option, I can come in, I can use the other one where it's a joint connection. So let's say I want to do all the rest of these handrails. I can select that, pick my connection, right click, pick my beam, right click, and then select all my other posts. Right click. You'll notice that it copies them all down the line. Now, in some cases, depending on the handrail, you may notice that the final post is rotated. Okay, so if you do, just don't put the connection on there. You have two choices, right? You can go in and you can create a new connection for left and one for left, one for right. That'll work. Or you can do all of them as a joint connection and then just do this one separately. And then when you go into here, allow, that's going to be a primary connection, but you can allow object modification on that separate one. And then you just come in and don't forget you have access to everything and you can change the positioning of that connection to the other side. So you can rotate that part that the plate is attached to the other side, and you should be good to go. Just be aware of your weld. Make sure that it's welded up properly. But that gives you the ability to rotate your connection after the fact, depending on what you've attached and how you've attached it. You're also going to notice that in this case here, I made these a joint connection. So if I do that to the one, they all get affected at the same time. So the joint connection works. It creates that joint connection and allows you to modify several connections at the same time. I'm just going to go back now. I'm going to reset my UCS here. I'm going to go back into the one that I created before. That's being saved on, again, we'll find that drive C, program data, Autodesk, Advanced Steel, USA, shared, and connection templates. I'm going to open up the original one here. Okay. I'm going to create a different type of connection just to the side quickly so we can see a column and a beam as an example. So if I come in here and I place a column, I'll put that off to the side, and I'm in the same drawing. I'm in the same DWG. I'll change the shape to, let's say, I section. W, and default's usually a 12 by 26. We'll use that, that's fine. Okay. So I have my column here, and I can set that however I want, whether it's facing the web or facing the flange sticking out, and then I can build off of that. The one important thing about this, however, is when you're doing this, that you build it the way that you would typically build it. So if I'm putting the column in by center, so I have that system line in the center, then I should, when I'm making the custom connection, I do the same thing. Otherwise, when you go to place it, it may not come out properly. So if you're doing beams by top of steel, then make sure that you put the beam by top of steel. If you're doing columns by center, put the columns by center. Not doing that and then trying to use the connection can cause issues. So just make sure you're inserting the shapes the way that you normally would, especially your main members. Okay. So I'm going to close that. I'll come back. I'll do another one here. Just going to draw in a beam coming off of it. Do it like this. So I'll put this as, I don't know, 5 feet. And my UCS is rotated, so I'll do it again. I'll just put it in properly. There we go. And I'll grab that center point, just to make it easy. Do 5 feet, and there I have a beam coming up. Now I want to connect this up. Okay. I'm going to set this up, create my shapes. These are going to be my main elements. Now I'm going to use a couple of out-of-the-box connections again. Let's say clip angle. I'll select the column and the beam. Oops. The column and then the beam. And I'll place a clip angle. I'm just going to use the defaults. So I have a clip angle here. Maybe I want that to be seated. So I can do a seated beam connection. So again, column, beam. It's going to place that seated connection in. Okay. So if I want it bolted through the top, I can do that. If I don't, I can say bottom angle, I want that through secondary, and the top angle, I want that through secondary as well. But you can set this up so that you have your seated connections however you want. You have your clip angles however you want. You go and set the connections in. It's very quick and easy that way. You know, maybe this is all you do and you just want to have that the same way every single time. You can set that connection up once and then go and use your custom connection. I'm going to do a little bit more though. I'm going to put some, let's say I have a pipe or something coming through here. So let's make a modification. So there's an opening. I'll go like that. And here, I'll come off of that a little bit. Keep snapping the other way. I'm going to go to the wireframe, make it easier. I want to modify the beam. I'm going to come off of this, let's say from the center of the plate, a little bit. It's still going the wrong way. Okay. I'll do a line here. Oh, it's the UCS, that's why. Okay. Try again. There we go. Now I'm getting my tracking 6 inches over. We'll make that 2 inches round or something. And there we have an opening. Okay. I can come in, maybe I want to have some corner work done at the top or something, you know, I can chamfer the corners or whatever the case may be. I want to put a plate underneath here. I'm going to add a regular plate so you can see how this works and what the difference is. Let me just come into here. I'll put reset it. There we go. Now I can draw my plate. So I'll just do a regular plate here. I'll come in, I'll do a nearest to the other side. And I'll put that like that so it's sitting underneath. I'll even weld it together here. So now I've got a weld, shop welded. And I'm going to put the regular custom connection plate that I was talking about before under there. So I'll just pick that, I'll select my beam, Do I want to have a reference point? I can if I want. I can put it, let's say I want the top point here or something like that. I'll put it to the other side. So it's at the bottom, and I'll move it back a bit. So let's offset that by, I don't know, 8 inches or so, maybe a little more. 12, there we go. Okay. So that gives us, there, a plate underneath, and I'll weld that one too. So one of these plates is drawn in manually, and one of them is using a custom connection. Let's make a quick connection out of this. I'll create. Again, it's 2 beams in this case. So just pick the parts that are the main parts that are always going to be there when you start. So column, beam, give it a name, right? Column, beam. Select the parts. So again, I'm just going to come across like that, pick all my parts. Okay. And I get my blue box. In this case, I do want it coming flush to the other piece. My beam comes right in. I'll highlight that and say this is going to be the column, and highlight that. You can see that's the beam. Close it, save it. Now, this is already in the proper folder. We opened up the file from that folder. So I'm going to close that, and then I'll just place in a column and a beam here. We can see. Now that I have that standard template, anytime I start a new drawing, I'm going to have the option now to add that in. So there's my column. I'll pick a beam, pull it out. And there's my beam. If I place in the connection on here, I'll just use this. Oops, I haven't finished with the beam. So there's my, see, it's added it in here now. In the list, I have that connection available. I still have the other one. They're both in the same drawing. So that's why they're in the same section. So column beam, say OK. Select column, select beam. Allow modifications if I want. I don't have to, but put that in. But you can see in here now, it's done the clip angle, the seated connection. It's done the opening, the modifications there, the modifications on the corner for me. It's got my 2 plates underneath. But what happens if this is not a 12 by 26? Maybe it's a 14 by 26 or sorry, 14 by 26, yeah. Well, you'll notice when I make the beam a different size, the plate that was used from the custom connections actually adjusts automatically with that beam size, whereas the one that I drew manually does not. All right, so one of the things or one of the reasons why you want to use the tools from here instead of drawing them manually if you can. If the tool exists here, use it from here, is because it'll place a reference, and you'll see a lot of these are for plates because plates don't get a reference point typically. And so when I change the beam size, or if I go to a different beam size, that plate does not adjust with it. Whereas if I use it from the custom connections, you can see that it will adjust with it. All right. So this gives us just kind of a couple of examples of where we can go in and use a custom connection. We can, again, do a handrail connection if we wanted to. You can see I just pick the beam and the post, and then I can copy those connections. The same thing holds true. I can do a column and a beam together, create a connection, and then just include those elements, place it in. And you always have access, if you want, after the fact, to go in and adjust them to whatever you need, right? So bolt parameters, vertical bolts, I only want 2. You see, you have even though it's part of the custom connection, you can still use the connections that you originally used when making it. You have access to the feature cuts. You can resize the hole. You have access to the plates, to the objects that you've drawn manually. You still get the grip points. You can readjust them. If you've drawn it using another tool from the custom connection, you can go in and you can change joint properties there if you want. You know, maybe I didn't want it on the bottom. I wanted it on both sides, or I wanted it on the top. I could adjust that as well. So that is the custom connection, the basics on how you can use that. And that's pretty much all I have to show for today. I hope the presentation has been helpful. Have a great day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to put on the screen here while we wait for any questions. If you guys are interested in a free trial for Power Pack for Advanced Steel, you can click right there. And Doug, are there any questions that you wanted to elaborate on or summarize on that were put into the chat? Oh, you're on mute.
How does that sound? Better?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, well, I think most of them were answered, but if there's anybody who feels that maybe it didn't quite fully answer it, just let me know. I did notice a couple of new ones at the bottom come in here. So there was Robert Oswald wrote, and I just lost it. Where did it go? There we go. Can a custom connection have a node attached and a connection check be made? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by a node attached, but basically a custom connection is just basically a connection. And maybe I didn't explain too well in the video. It's a connection you're going to draw once. It's more of a photograph of a connection than it is like the dialogues that you get from the connection vault is a whole different story. That's programmed connections with set or defined output. And then you can switch between the defined output inside the connection vault dialogues. The custom connections are more of something that you're going to design manually, and it takes almost a snapshot or photograph of that so that you can use it again in similar scenarios. Now, it is flexible in that once you place it in, you can update it or adjust it. So if you needed, for example, on clip angles, more bolts, you can add more bolts come in, just go to the dialog, open up the connection from the custom connection because it allows you to make manual modifications. Open up the dialog for that clip angle and then make the change to 3 bolts or something, or 4 bolts. You can go and you can move parts, you can stretch parts, you can adjust it after the fact if you need to. But typically it's just a snapshot of a connection that you use over and over again so that you can bring it in quickly without having to build it each and every time. So that's what a custom connection is. It's not really a connection vault connection per se. So does it have a node attached? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that node would come in or what exactly that refers to.
Well, Robert, he did put an update. He said the node is used to add loads and check to see if the connection passes or fails.
Okay, so I know that most of that is when you're doing your system lines and you're doing member to member, it'll connect those system lines together. So because Advanced Steel does not do analysis, it's not an analysis program. But let's say I'm passing it over to the analysis program, it will pass the information across to that. Usually it's going to say, these two members are connected and these are the parts that we have here connecting them. So whether it's a clip angle, welded or bolted or whatever the case may be, that information gets passed over to the analysis program as well. As far as a node is concerned for the connection, I don't believe so. I think that's made member to member in the program. But from an analysis point of view, I don't do analysis with Advanced Steel, so I couldn't tell you for the loads in that. And it doesn't do the standard connection check. It won't do like you would get out of a connection vault connection. It doesn't have that option for the connection checking that the standard connections have. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. All right, the next question is this a design tool and detailing tool or just a detailing tool?
It is just a modeling and documentation tool. Advanced Steel does not do design per se. There are programs that it can connect to that does do connection design. But as far as the program itself, Advanced Steel itself, it doesn't do designing. There is a simple tool for basic connections. If you're doing clip angles, shear plates and that, when you open up from the connection vault, you have an option to check to see if the connection passes or fails based on certain items, such as loads and stuff like that. But it looks at that scenario only. And, does this column and this beam, if it's connected by a clip angle, pass? But it doesn't take into account all the different connections. For example, if there's bracing or what type of base plate's being used or if there's connections above. So it's a very focused on that one connection, is it good or not, basically type checking. So the program's not really designed for proper connection design per se. But it does connect to other programs that do it, and you can, basically model it in. If you know what the information is that you need in order for it to pass, you can always model that in. It's a modeling and documentation program more than a design program.
Okay. Fantastic. And Eddie said, is PowerPack 2025 available now?
2025 is available. Be careful though, because the PowerPack for 2025 will only work on 2025. In the past, PowerPack releases would work on the current version and the previous version of Advanced Seal. So, for example, 2024 would work on 2024 and 2023. But now, with the 2025 release, 2025 PowerPack only works on Advanced Steel 2025. And the reason for that is they had to update all of the code in the background to .NET 8 to match what they've done with Advanced Steel itself from Autodesk. So because all the code's been updated, it's running primarily only on the 2025 version. Going forward, it may go back to being current and previous, but if you are planning on getting the most recent PowerPack, make sure you have the same version of Advanced Steel in order to run it on, because it has to be the same.
Very good point. All right, Dave said, can you propagate a custom connection? I work in an office with multiple locations. Any strategy for sharing custom connections?
That's a good question. I can't remember. I believe so. I know connections can propagate, no problem. But a custom connection, I know it can copy, just like you saw in the video using the copy connection tools. Propagate, I'm not 100% sure. You have to be very careful when using propagate as well, because propagate sometimes places connections where you don't want them to go, right? So you have to work in a defined area when you're doing it. But just check, just select the blue box, right click, and if it says propagate, then yes. I don't have it open at the moment, so I couldn't test it exactly, but I don't remember for the custom connection. Standard connections, absolutely.
Awesome. I'll snag his email and I'll send it over to you, Doug.
Okay.
All right. Robert, I guess this is more of a comment. He said you can manually add nodes. I think that was a comment to his question earlier. And then Norman said, can you share the folder address again to save custom connections?
Yeah, so let's see if I can grab that right now. I'll put it in the chat window here. Give me 2 seconds. I'll use 2025 as an example, but whatever version of Advanced Steel you're using would be the one that you want to use. And there's Control C, and where is that? Control V. There we go. I just put it in the chat window at the bottom.
Perfect. Steven asks, are the connections embedded into the current model, or can they be saved to be used in other projects/sessions?
Yeah, so the custom connections, that folder that I just placed in the chat window, if you save them to that folder, they become available to every project that you're working on. So every time you open up the custom connection tool, regardless of what DWG you're in, it's going to be there, it's going to be available. That's the reason for going to the Autodesk Advanced Steel USA shared folder there, where they have the custom connection folder. Is because that's a kind of a generalized or a specific location within the program that it recognizes, and it always looks there no matter what DWG you're working from, and it'll always have your connections available to you.
All right. Lee says, can it import STAAD, STAAD, design model for connection detailing?
Don't think so. I mean, they do have a STAAD, but I'm not sure. I've never tried it with connection detailing. They do have a STAAD import on the export and import tab, or along the ribbon where that tab is, export and import. So you can import a STAAD file. I don't know if that would do the connections from STAAD or not. I doubt it. I very highly doubt it. I think that's just for your basic structures going back and forth.
All right. Robert says it does connect to Autodesk Robot for analysis. And then Danny says, how does the UCS relate to the custom connection?
Okay, so you're going to want to build, and that's another thing too, I don't know if I mentioned it. When you do your custom connections, you're going to want to build the connection the way that you're primarily the way you're going to use it. So for example, you have a system line throughout your object. This system line, if you're doing your columns with the system line centered, then you want to, when you build your connection, have your columns centered, the system line centered. If you do your beams top of steel and the system lines at top steel, you want to have your beams at top of steel. So it's more based on the objects themselves than the UCS, but the UCS may affect it as well. I don't believe so. 'Cause if you're doing one single object, you're picking a beam, UCS may affect it. But if you're picking two beams, it looks at the relationship between the two objects. Or if you're picking three beams, it looks at the relationship between three objects. And I don't believe UCS matters at that point.
Awesome. This is a hot topic. We got some great questions here. All right. Michael says, for clarity, can you save more than one connection in a single DWG saved in the connection template folder, or does each connection need its own DWG?
No. So, and I mentioned that during the video as well. You can create multiple connections in the same DWG. Just when you create the connection, you're going to select the parts related to that one connection. And then you'll go and create another connection, then select the parts related to that connection. You'll see each connection inside that DWG will get its own blue box around it, basically. So when you save the file, you could have several connections in the same DWG, and they'll be listed in the tools when you go to use them from Advanced Steel.
All right. Ben says, when selecting an entire model to move, it moves the beams and then moves the parts again, so everything is separated. I think this is a comment, maybe it's a question. Let me read that back again. When selecting an entire model to move, it moves the beams and then moves the parts again, so everything is separated.
Okay. I'd have to see that. I have to look into that a little bit more, but just from the description there, I'm not sure exactly what's taking place. I'd have to take a look at that. And that's something, if you're running into that and you're having a problem, don't forget GRAITEC has support, so you can always just whip them off an email and say, what's going on? Why is it doing this? They can help you out as well. So
awesome.
That sounds more like moving the model sounds more like the support question related to your workflow that you're having an issue with. So I would recommend going down that route. That way they can dig into it deeper with you.
Awesome. Dion says, if you update to a later version, will it remember your custom connections from previous versions, or will you have to copy paste them over to the new version directly?
Your custom connections, like I said, if you do it the way it was here, it's centralized. And then you would have them available to you for insertion again from the new DWG that you're working in. It's basically the parts are going to be in your model that you're placing them into. I mean, if you want, you can copy them to a new one, but I don't believe the custom connection will come across during the copy. You're better off reinserting it into the new DWG. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought now. But yeah, that if you're just copying from one drawing to the next, I don't believe you're going to be able to copy the custom connection across, just like you wouldn't be able to copy the clip angle across to a different DWG. But you could always insert it again inside that new drawing because it'll be available to you there. Okay. One thing I do want to point out to you guys, for information-wise, if you're doing anything custom, whether it's a custom connection, custom shape, custom whatever, I would recommend highly that you use from the tools palette. They have a save option for save, use, and store use data. Just put that in there so that if you share the model with somebody else, they can see it, because if they don't have your customization, they may not see the same thing that you're seeing. Now, as far as the parts are concerned, they'll come across, but if you give it to somebody else, they may not see your connection. So just use from the tools tab, the store use data, so that everything that's part of that model gets saved with that DWG when you share with somebody else.
All right. Here it goes. Does beam direction matter?
Beam direction, there is a start and an end to a beam direction. So it depends what you're referencing. So the plates, for example, from the custom connection tools, they have, from system line, from end of part. So if you start doing things like that, it looks at the beam direction. So it's going to pick the end of part, but it's going to always pick the same end. So if you draw from left to right or right to left, it might matter. Again, if you're using more than one shape, it looks at how the shapes are related to one another. It's coming in, this shape's coming into that shape, and then it places it that way. If you're doing it on, for example, a handrail post, and a lot of times you'll have all posts in the same direction except for the last one. The last one is turned 180 degrees, and then maybe the connection comes out the wrong way. And that's why I mentioned that in the video. You may need to create a right and a left, or you may need to rotate the object. So it depends on what the situation is, but part direction, the way it's drawn can matter and affect the custom connection. So you might need a right and you might need a left for the same connection.
Okay, and Dion said to clarify, if you update from, let's say, 2025 to 2026, will you have to remake your custom connection DWG?
No, when you do it, you can just, it's a DWG, right? So if you go to 2026, you can bring that, it's just a save to DWG, bring it over into 2026 into the same folder. You might need to open the drawing once because it's a new version of Advanced Steel. So you open the drawing once and then it'll tell you you're going to update to the new SQL or whatever the case is going on, and then save it. And then you're ready to go with that, and then you'll have it. So it's just your DWG with your connections. It's just a DWG with those parts. You bring it across when you migrate. As a matter of fact, I believe the migrate tool does it for you, but if not, you just copy the DWG across.
All right. And Dave says, does it save the connection as a custom connections when you use stored data?
It's going to call, when you use store data, it's going to save everything that's a part of the model. So if you have your custom connection there, when somebody who doesn't have that opens it up, they'll see that box for the custom connection. They'll be able to use it. If they see, if you have a custom shape, that's separate from what we looked at today, then that shape normally would come across to somebody who doesn't have the shape as a triangle. But if you store the data, they'll be able to see the actual data. You know what I mean? They'll see the actual shape. So whenever you're doing anything custom connection, custom shapes, custom model roles, custom descriptions, materials, if you have custom elements in your model and you're sharing it with somebody else who doesn't have your customization, use the store use data so they can see exactly what you have when you created that. It takes all the information and stores it with the DWG.